and welcome to Careers of the Future, a show where students can hear directly from Ismailis at the leading edge of their fields about how to most effectively prepare for the future of work. My name is Amika Qureshi and I am a student, as well as a member of the Global Ismaili Youth Team. I'm so excited to be your host for this episode. Today we will be exploring education and technology with our special guest, Rahim Hirji. Rahim works in the ever-changing area surrounding media, technology, and education. He currently serves as the UK manager for Quizlet, a global education technology company. Rahim's interests center around emerging technologies and how they will change the way humankind works, lives, and learns. Rahim, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Amika. Really glad to be here. Really excited to be able to share both my journey and some insight into the industry to hopefully help lots more students go into the field of education, edtech, and technology.
All right, let's begin by learning a little bit more about yourself and about what you do. Could you please elaborate on the concept of edtech? Because I think it's something that's new for a lot of us, and contextualize the work that you do.
Sure. Well, edtech or education technology is perceived as something that's relatively niche. The way that I look at education technology or edtech is it's the kind of sister to education, and they work very closely together. So edtech allows multiple different things for both students, for teachers, and the whole education system. And within education and edtech, the real play is around how do you leverage technology to really benefit the end student or user. And there's multiple different areas. So, for example, there is class management and administration. There is content and course management. There's experiential learning, and there's things like online proctoring, which allows the online exams, and another big space which is online tutoring. And those are just a few examples of where I see edtech is, and there's lots of nascent areas around that.
Right, yeah, that's so interesting. And I think, like you mentioned, that edtech is quite a niche field. It's not something that many of us have heard of, although it's something that most of us have come in contact with. So kind of working off of that, can you please give us some insight about your motivations or what led you to aspire and to come into this field of study?
Absolutely. I started off my career not really within education on edtech, but I was looking for something that I could help impact a huge number of people. And I came out of business school and thinking that the industry that I wanted to go into was media, because a lot of people interacted with whatever consumption of media that you might have. I worked a little bit in for the Abu Dhabi government. In their media sector. I worked for HarperCollins, which is a publisher, and it's there where I really got I think my kind of calling for being within education and edtech. And when you look at the content that some of these publishers provide, you can really see that what they're creating is impacting students of different ages around the world. And that's when I thought, okay, I've really got to kind of go into this. And how do you put technology, which is one of my kind of majors, and apply that to education? And we'd seen at that time, the music industry go through disruption. We'd seen content going through disruption, and it was only a matter of time before education would go through that same vein. I started down that route with a business called Maths Doctor, which was an online tutoring business. And at the time of running that business, online tutoring seemed quite alien to everyone. Why would you have a tutor across the internet who's going to teach you something? And now it's prevalent all over. And so at that point, we were breaking in that concept into the market. My next startup was as a business that became known as EtonX, and that leveraged both some of that online tutoring, but also the concept of soft skills and how do you teach soft skills to students. We set that business up in China, which was very difficult for numerous different reasons. Ultimately, we created a great product with a live virtual classroom, which allows synchronous teaching, some asynchronous learning, which is learning through courseware, and then some live one-to-one type interaction with students in China. And then we took that global. Most recently, I've joined Quizlet, as you said, and Quizlet is a study tool which has machine learning behind it to support in the learning for whatever any student wants to do, and it's free at the point of use. So anyone can go to Quizlet and learn absolutely anything. It's used significantly for language learning, so learning English or learning another language. But you can learn science. My kids learn physics, chemistry, biology on it, and so there's lots that you can do in that vein. And I'm trying to take that business, which we're currently in the UK, and I'm looking to the Middle East, to Africa, and to Asia to see how big this can get. And globally, we're at about 60 million monthly active users, which is huge. And it's kind of realized my overall ambition, which is kind of what I was talking about in the beginning.
Yeah, I think that sounds amazing. Coming from a student background, I think from the point of view of a student, it's really easy to see that apps like technologies like Quizlet and Padlet and all these different things, they really revolutionize the journey of learning. And I think that brings me to my next question. How do you foresee technology not only revolutionizing education, but also maybe other fields of interest?
Well, I mean, great question. We've seen throughout the whole of 2020, we're being impacted, and our whole life, way of life is completely changed. Whether you're working, whether you're learning, whether you're teaching, and I think what we've seen within EdTech is an escalation of use of technology within the education sector. So over this probably 9 months that we're kind of in at the moment, we've probably seen 10 years worth of adoption. So we've moved up the S curve, adoption curve of adoption of EdTech within the sector, not only in kind of Western countries, but across Asia, in places in Africa, across Europe, and we've seen that at Quizlet. I've seen some of my peers at other companies seeing that kind of growth, and where EdTech wasn't really kind of perceived as a kind of mainstream career. What we're seeing now is a lot of people want to join this industry, whether they want to be a teacher and leverage technology, or whether they want to have impact within EdTech. And that's not just happening in EdTech; it's happening across multiple different careers. And I think you've just got to look at what's the beta factor around what's just happened, and that's our way of work is changing, how we're learning is changing. I'm sure we've done a lot more e-commerce over that period, and we're consuming content in a completely different way. And all of that's just escalated, and I think we'll see that across different industries during 2021, and I think we won't see a slowdown of that growth.
How do you see EdTech affecting the developing world?
Great question, Mika. Well, as I mentioned previously, we set up a business for China, and much as we might think that the developing world is somewhat behind, China and other parts of Asia are, in some cases, way ahead, and in places across Africa and Asia, and some parts of South America, there's been this leap where they've had a very simple classroom, and now they're moving directly towards mobile technology and being able to consume education, media, and whatever else on their mobile phone. Now, I don't think it's as plain sailing as that. I don't think that education is immediately going to move to the developing world at the rate that we might think. But if you look at the opportunities that we might see in Asia and Africa specifically, there's a UNESCO report which really talks about the need for teachers in 2030. So that's 10 years from now, or less than 10 years from now. And they're talking about an increased need of 70 million teachers. That's 70 million more teachers than we have today to service the world. Now, that rate of growth is not doable with the number of teachers that currently take on the profession. So how are we going to meet that gap? And I think what's going to happen is there are going to be more teachers for sure, but I think there's also going to be a leveraging of technology, and the combination of those two will support the growth in Asia and in Africa. Now, if you were to say to me, what's the opportunity for that? I'd say that if you want to be in education, those are the places to go. Go to India, go to Pakistan and serve there. Go to Africa and figure out what it is that is required within the education field there. And there's so many opportunities in different ways. It's not the same in every part of the world. In China, English is a big need. They also have other requirements in parts of Asia. In the Gulf, there are different needs. In Africa, there are different needs. So if you want to get into education, there's always going to be a job there. That's the way that I look at it, and say that pick out that career, be specific about what you want to do, and go and experience that for a couple of years or more. And I think it'd be a great experience for your career and something to build on.
Yeah, I think that's a very refreshing perspective. And especially the part you said about how we're going to need more teachers, that really stood out to me, because I think that everyone's really realizing that technology is quickly becoming a part of the education system and how individuals learn. So kind of adding on to this, do you think that the quick emergence of technology is displacing teachers in some way?
Another great question, Amika. We've and really topical. I've been on the phone to teachers this last 6 months, and we're offering some of our technology for free to support them in delivering classes and things of that nature. And as a teacher, you think, is this technology going to take over my job? I think that's ultimately what they're thinking. And with the things that we're able to do now, with using technology and using that machine learning and AI, to some degree, as a teacher, you think, okay, have I got a job in the next 5 or 10 years? But actually, I think if you think about in kindergarten, when you first start school as a little boy or a little girl, you really need the teacher to support you and handhold you and grow you as an individual. And that continues through primary school, less so in secondary school and less so in higher ed. But it's a path. So you will need a teacher at some point, and you will need someone to explain something to you. And it's about how the marriage of the educator and the technology come together to support that. And I very, very strongly believe that blended education is the future of education, and I think there's different realms around that. So some of which is online or self-directed, and some of it is with a teacher, perhaps to explain something that you don't understand. Because not everyone's as bright as you, Amika. So I think what's going to happen is that that blended route is going to continue, and the teacher's role becomes even more important because it becomes peaked in that specific explanation of helping a student who's stuck. I think it's very difficult for a student who's stuck in a certain area. It might be calculus. It might be another area in science. It might even be in coding. But you can plug away with these things, and sometimes you'll get to your end answer. But ultimately, if someone explains it to you in a slightly different way, and teaches you in the way that you need to be taught, because the way that you learn might be different, and that's what we're learning at the moment with learning science. Everyone learns in a completely different way. That makes the teacher's role that much more important. So that's where I kind of see it going, and that's where I tell teachers when we speak to them.
Yeah, I think I personally even really resonate with that. So many of my teachers have had such great impact on me, and I'm sure that's the case for so many of us. So kind of leading on with this, I think this whole like interview thing has really been getting me into the field of edtech. It's an emerging field for sure. So do you maybe have any suggestions for what us as the students who may be going into edtech, what kinds of fields could we read around just to get a flavor of edtech or to gain a deeper understanding of what it's all about?
Sure, I think there's a number of different areas to go about doing this. One, I think you need to appreciate the industry. What are the different components of the industry that exists? And there's a great report on Holon IQ, HOLON IQ, and there's a full report there. It talks about all of the different sectors within education and edtech. And then within that, it lists out all of the global companies that exist within that. Quizlet's in there, Baiju's, which is the biggest education edtech company in the world based out of India, is in there. But there's also some of the smaller ones and some of the niche ones. And that will give you a great picture of understanding what are the key companies, what are they doing, why some of the big, some big tech is in there. Google has Google Classroom, which is a great LMS linkage between the student and teacher. So those companies are in there, and it gives you a great feel for what's going on right now and what's going to happen in the next 5 years. Because some of those smaller startups are the ones that are going to be leading the industry. So I'd say that's kind of the first thing. The second thing is to read the key reports. There's OECD, UNESCO, World Economic Forum. They've got great reports about what's happening over the next 5, 10, 20 years. And those reports, they're a little dry sometimes, but they're usually on the money. So if you go back to 10 years and figure out what's going on now, that's what's, they kind of pitched it pretty much correctly, even with what's going on. So read those reports. The World Economic Forum is really a great, rich resource. So go and read the stuff there. So I think that would be another area. And finally, I think to really understand is to do a course in education and edtech. Now, we're actually very lucky now that with all these MOOCs that are available, there's so many courses to go and do. But there's one on a MOOC called Future Learn. So there's one of the main MOOCs is Coursera, which I think many people know. But there's one on Future Learn, and there's one for teachers on there, which is really about education and edtech and how you best use edtech within the classroom. It seems like really quite a practical course, but it gives you the insight about what edtech is all about, how it can be applied, and the kind of improvements that you're able to get and support teachers with. So those are kind of the three areas. And in addition to that reading, as I said before, is just try and do some teaching, or try and get involved within education and edtech, even if that's not your key field, because that very act of explaining how to do something to someone else is really what teaching is all about. Is how do you get someone to understand something so that they understand it from their perspective? And those are the kind of areas that I would recommend personally.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that's a very valid, that's a really insightful kind of point of view. Kind of building off of that, I think a lot of our viewers here today are students who aspire to be, in today's day and age, we see technology growing a lot. So they aspire to go into fields that involve technology and involve education. So would you maybe have any advice for our students viewing today, or even our teachers?
So, I mean, I think whatever um, career you want to go into at this point in time, what's really critical is that you have an appreciation of data and data science. And I talk about that quite sincerely because, even within education, you know, data science is really important, whether that's learning science, or whether it's the application of some of that learning to be able to create a greater learning experience. So data science is really important. And just having that appreciation. If you're not a coder or a developer or an engineer, I think you've just got to have an appreciation for it to do that. The other thing I'd say is you've got to figure out whether you want to go broad or you want to go deep. So in education and edtech, either figure out whether you're going to go generic and then go deeper later in your career, or if you've got a real passion, then go after that. So if you are a teacher or an educator, try and do that teaching and educating as early as possible. There's lots of opportunity to teach. At the moment, there's online tutoring that you can kind of sign up to. There's millions of students in China who want to learn English, and that's a great opportunity. You can help within the community, and I think if you want to go deep and be an educator, I think that's one of the ways to kind of move forward.
Right, so I think you touched upon some very valid points over there. And really, this is a follow-up question more than anything. Even for my personal knowledge, I think I'm really interested, and I'm sure lots of our viewers are really interested in learning about what kinds of skills do you believe that students and teachers alike need to really excel in this field of edtech?
So I think we're going into a future where emerging technologies, artificial intelligence, and all of that is going to change the world. So if you think about the skills that are going to be critical in both education and edtech, but also in other generic, work, we've got to look at what that world is going to be like. So one, I'd say, have an appreciation of those emerging technologies and see how they may apply to your career. And that's about reading around, figuring out what's next, and just being curious about the world. I think that's really important. I think one of the other things that kind of gets overlooked is the concept of soft skills. So things like critical thinking, being able to have public speaking, creativity, these types of traits are going to be hugely important in a world where a robot won't necessarily be able to replicate what you're doing. So what I'd say for that is to try and look for opportunities to excel in those areas. If you're in school, figure out practical projects that you can take on. If you're at university, try and join as many clubs as possible. As humans, we're social beings, and try and do as many things as you can do with other humans. So try and work in a project, because that's what the real world is like. Try and work together with someone. In one of the weird things I think about when we're growing up in school is we're always trying to beat the other student and come top of the class. When actually, in reality, you've got to work together to be able to deliver great work in the workplace. So that type of soft skills, those type of soft skills are really, really important in the workplace. And when we talk specifically about education and edtech, there are a number of courses you can do. I think what's really important is the practicality of understanding what education is all about. Ultimately, we're trying to help a student improve by X% in what they're doing. That could be software that's doing that. It could be a human who's doing that. Or it could be a combination of those things. And so where do we fit within that? So if you're thinking about going into EdTech as a comp sci or engineering major, what are the things ultimately you're trying to do, and work back to your kind of core strength? So really to think about the longer term goal of what you're trying to create. And those are the kind of three areas that I'd say are important, not only in education and EdTech, but also in multiple careers.
Yeah, I think that's such a beautiful way to really end this off by showing our viewers that there are so many opportunities out there, and that they just really need to get their foot out the door, and the world will follow. So that being said, thank you so much, Rahim, for your time. It has truly been an honor speaking with you today and hearing your insights on EdTech and different fields of study.
Thank you, Amika. Really glad to be here.
And thank you so much to all of our viewers for tuning in today. Make sure that you tune into the Smiley for the rest of our episodes, where we will be talking to leaders from all over the world who excel in their fields of study and really learning about how their industries are being shaped by the future of work. As always, stay safe.